What if the person sitting across from you on a first date isn't just a potential spouse, but like a mirror reflecting decades of societal sacrifice?
Wow, yeah. That is a heavy thought to start with.
Right. But welcome to the deep dive. Today we are opening up the files provided by you, our listener, the learner. And you brought us this fascinating lecture transcript that honestly, it kicks off with a very relatable everyday scenario.
The classic question of how to recognize the right person to spend your life with.
Exactly. Just trying to figure out dating.
Yeah.
But it quickly pulls the rug right out from under us. I mean, it reveals this massive multi-generational framework for how we're supposed to be living our entire lives.
It really is a remarkable progression of ideas. Because usually, the search for a partner defaults to this rigid
Oh,
checklist,
totally. The resume.
right? The resume. We catalog their income, physical attractiveness, educational pedigree.
Shared hobbies, whether they like dogs.
Exactly. We approach relationships with this highly transactional mindset. We're essentially evaluating a human being the way we might evaluate, I don't know, a real estate investment.
Right, looking for the highest yield with the lowest risk.
Precisely.
Okay, let's unpack this because the core premise we are looking at today completely invalidates that checklist.
It really does.
The foundational argument here is that finding a quote-unquote good person is literally impossible if you haven't first cultivated your own inner quality. The transcript actually refers to this as developing your inner mass or your inner volume.
Yeah, and it forces this pivot from outward acquisition to inward cultivation. Because the concept of inner mass suggests that external markers, like wealth or status or just a really symmetrical face, they're just scaffolding.
Just the outer shell.
Right. And if the interior of a person is hollow, that scaffolding will eventually collapse. The imagery used here is actually quite stark. It warns against individuals whose insides are dark and devoid of jewels.
Oh, wow. Dark and devoid of jewels. That phrase really paints a vivid picture.
It does.
Because, I mean, a person might look absolutely perfect on paper, but if they lack that internal density, it's just a facade. And the ultimate metric for measuring someone's inner mass turns out to be incredibly simple and practical, too.
It's something you can test immediately.
Yeah, you don't need to see their bank statements or their credit score. You just need to observe how they navigate a conversation.
Conversation is basically the ultimate stress test for inner volume.
How so?
Well, a person with low inner mass requires constant external validation to feel substantial. So in a conversation, this manifests as monopolizing the dialogue.
Right, always bringing it back to themselves.
Exactly. Constantly steering the topic back to their own achievements and trying to dominate or drag you into their specific worldview. They just lack the structural integrity to hold space for anyone else.
It's like they're looking in a mirror instead of looking out a window at you.
Oh, I love that analogy.
Right, because they aren't actually engaging with you as an independent human being. They're just using you as an audience, like a reflective surface for their own ego.
That metaphor captures the dynamic perfectly. Because the counter behavior, the clearest indicator of high inner mass, is simply the capacity to actively listen.
And listening isn't just waiting for your turn to speak.
No, not at all. It requires the active suspension of your own ego so you can absorb and understand another person's reality. That baseline effort to comprehend someone else is the fundamental building block of caring for them.
So if they can't even do that,
Right. If a person cannot muster the inner volume to listen to the person sitting right across the table from them, sharing a life with them will inevitably lead to isolation and resentment.
man, that is so true. Which brings up a critical question here. If the prerequisite for a good relationship is elevating our own inner volume, what exactly is the blueprint? I mean, what kind of person are we supposed to be building ourselves into?
And this is where the historical parallels come into play in the text. Specifically, the reclamation of the term sadaibu.
Yeah, I was a bit confused reading this part. The text uses this old historical term, sadebu, which historically meant the noble or scholarly class, right?
The educated elite.
So how does an ancient class system apply to us trying to navigate life today? It seems a bit out of place.
What's fascinating here is that what's being proposed is a complete modernization of that concept. Historically, yes, they were distinct from the commoners and held the power, but the era of a segregated, exclusive ruling class is over.
Okay, so who are the modern sadebu then?
The new paradigm dictates that anyone who receives a formal education today is a modern Sadebu. You are an intellectual leader.
Hold on, I need to push back on that logic for a second.
Sure.
Because if everyone with a college degree today is considered an intellectual leader, doesn't that inherently dilute the concept of leadership? I mean, if everyone is a sadebu, then no one is, right?
Well, that assumes leadership is a zero-sum game.
Yeah.
A game based on ruling over a subjugated class.
Like a traditional hierarchy.
Exactly. But the redefinition here shifts leadership from a position of exclusive power to a baseline of collective societal responsibility.
Oh, I see.
It's not about sitting on a throne. It's about operating with a specific duty. The text defines the highest duty of the modern intellectual as loving their country.
But it clarifies that this doesn't mean loving a government or blind nationalism.
Right, exactly. It's explicitly decoupled from that. Loving the country is defined as loving the people. It means actively working to understand and elevate the society around you.
So it's shifting from a hierarchy of power to a meritocracy of care.
That's a great way to put it.
So when you, the listener, are working on your inner mass, you aren't doing self-improvement just to optimize your dating profile.
No, the stakes are much higher.
You're actually developing the capacity to fulfill your societal role as someone who understands the broader community.
Yeah.
And you are looking for a partner who is also a leader, a fellow Sadebru, equipped to care for the world.
Exactly. And that really explains why the whole mirror conversation style is such a severe red flag.
Yeah, because if an individual lacks the capacity to care for one person across a dinner table, they are fundamentally incapable of fulfilling their societal duty to care for the broader public. Wow, that connects the micro to the macro so perfectly.
It really does.
But honestly, that creates a massive gap in how we actually prepare for life.
Yeah.
Because if society expects us to be these grand intellectual leaders, yet formal education mostly just teaches us abstract theory, where is the actual classroom for leadership?
Right. We definitely aren't learning how to understand the complexities of human society in a freshman seminar.
Exactly. I don't remember taking that class in college, so where do we get it?
We don't get it in school. And that gap is quantified in the text with a very specific metric. They call it the 30% rule.
Okay, break that down for us.
The 30% rule states that formal education, whether it's an undergraduate degree, a master's, or even a highly specialized doctorate, is designed to provide a maximum of 30% of the preparation you actually need to function as an intellectual leader.
Wait, really? Only 30%? That totally validates that universal whiplash everyone feels after graduation.
Absolutely.
You walk across the stage, you grab your diploma, and suddenly you realize you are completely unequipped for reality. It's like if school is just reading the instruction manual, society is the actual driving test in rush hour traffic.
That's spot on. Memorizing the manual is essential, obviously, but it's only 30% of the equation. You still have to get in the car and figure out how to merge on the highway without crashing.
So where does the other 70% come from?
The remaining 70% of that education can only be acquired through direct, unshielded engagement with society.
Just getting out there.
Yes.
Yes.
And nature, or you could say the societal system itself, enforces a very specific mechanism to ensure we get that remaining 70%.
Which is?
The entry-level or part-time job.
The R-bait.
Yes, the R-bait.
We typically view a part-time job during our student years or our early 20s as this frustrating, purely economic hurdle, you know.
A necessary evil to pay the bills.
Right, you're waiting tables, you're working retail, dealing with angry customers just to cover your rent and your textbooks. It usually feels like a massive distraction from your quote-unquote real goals.
But according to this philosophy, that friction is the core curriculum.
Oh, so?
Because nature gives you the condition of needing a paycheck to force you out of your academic bubble. It forces you to interact with socioeconomic strata you would never otherwise encounter.
You're literally rubbing shoulders with the real world.
Exactly. You learn the mechanics of human behavior, supply and demand, patience, conflict resolution, all at the grassroots level. You are literally studying the society you are destined to lead.
That completely reframes the daily grind. Like, you aren't just slinging coffee, you're doing field research.
Exactly.
But wait, what about the exceptions? Like, what if you were born into a silver spoon scenario?
The wealth exception.
Yeah, if you have enough generational wealth that you never actually need to work a part-time job to survive, does wealth just buy you a waiver from that 70%?
No, nature doesn't offer waivers. It just assigns a different syllabus.
Okay, I like that. A different syllabus.
The premise here is that economic advantage is never dispensed randomly. Nature never gives out even 10 cents without a specific reason.
Interesting. So what is the reason?
If you possess significant resources, you aren't meant to learn society's mechanics by working a cash register. Instead, your curriculum is to use that capital to invest in society.
So you're looking at it from a higher altitude.
Right. You're meant to observe macroeconomic shifts and understand human enterprise from a different vantage point. So the entry point changes, but that mandatory 70% societal education remains absolute.
Because the ultimate goal is universal, producing leaders who actually comprehend the people they share the world with.
Exactly.
And this philosophy, it extends way beyond our early 20s, doesn't it? It scales up into our long-term careers, fundamentally redefining the modern workplace.
It does. It changes everything about how we view our jobs.
Because generally, we view a company as an entity that extracts our labor in exchange for capital. I give you 40 hours, you give me a means to survive.
It's a very transactional view of a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But the reality of a stable corporate or institutional environment is much more profound. A functioning company isn't just a place that buys your labor.
What is it then?
It is an intricate ecosystem built upon the accumulated blood, sweat, and capital of the public.
Wow.
When you are hired, that company isn't merely exploiting you. It is acting as an incubator.
An incubator, I love that term for it.
Right. It provides you with a steady income, physical safety, and organizational structure so that you can continue increasing your inner mass without the daily threat of starvation.
So society is effectively paying your living expenses so you have a safe space to finish evolving into a leader.
Yes.
That is an incredibly empowering way to view a Tuesday morning staff meeting. Like, you are there because the broader community has invested in your potential to eventually give back.
It completely replaces the modern cynicism about work with this profound sense of accountability. If the public is financing your incubation, your responsibility to ultimately benefit that public is immense.
But, looking at the workplace as this benevolent incubator implies that someone or some force purposefully designed it that way.
Yes, it does.
And that introduces the most sweeping concept we need to explore today. Because this isn't just some recent shift in corporate HR policy, right?
No.
This is the result of a massive multi-generational framework that started decades ago.
To understand this incubator system, you have to look back at the historical reset.
The post-war era.
Exactly. Following the absolute devastation of World War II and the Korean War, global society was essentially a blank slate.
Everything was wiped out.
The physical infrastructure was gone, economies were decimated, and the baseline human priority was just raw survival. The generations that emerged from that wreckage had to rebuild the world from scratch.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the text tracks the timeline of that rebuilding process through 12-year generational cycles.
Yes, moving roughly from the dragon to the rabbit years in the Eastern Zodiac.
Let's break down the mechanics of this, starting with the baby boomers. The text says that in that post-war environment, only about 30% of the boomer generation had the opportunity to become formally educated intellectuals.
Which means 70% did not.
Right.
And a massive portion of that remaining group, 40% or more, they consciously sacrificed their own potential for the sake of the system.
Yeah, and we throw around the word sacrifice a lot, but let's be really specific about what that looked like on the ground.
It was brutal.
In a family emerging from poverty back then, there wasn't enough capital to send every child to school. So you had older siblings dropping out of middle school to work in textile factories or doing back-breaking manual labor.
They traded away their own intellectual development.
Completely. They gave up their own chance to build that inner mass through formal education just to generate the capital needed to keep their older or younger siblings in a classroom.
They were laying the physical and economic bedrock. They built the factories, the roads, the early corporate structures that would eventually become the incubators we rely on today.
They severed their own upward trajectory to ensure the generational engine could start turning.
Exactly, which directly enabled the next 12-year cycle, Generation X.
Right, Gen X. Because of the infrastructure and the wealth generated by the boomers' physical labor, Gen X experienced a massive leap. The rate of individuals able to access formal education and become intellectuals jumped to 70%.
The incubators were becoming more efficient. Society was stabilizing, which allowed a majority of the population to focus on intellectual cultivation rather than just fighting for basic survival.
And that upward curve leads us directly to the final stage of this roadmap, the digital generation.
Today's youth and young adults.
Yeah. And for this current generation, the rate of educated intellectuals reaches near 100%, or at least over 90%. This entire cohort is composed of modern Sadebu.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals the ultimate causality behind this entire historical process.
It wasn't an accident.
No, it was a master plan. The grandparents sacrificed their education to lay the foundation, And the parents built out the institutional incubators entirely to manufacture this specific moment in time.
To create this current generation.
Yes. A generation that is fully educated, perfectly positioned, and completely unburdened by the raw daily struggle for survival.
And the purpose of manufacturing a generation of 100% intellectuals is encapsulated in this fascinating term the text uses, Hongik Ingen.
Yes, Hongik Ingen. It's a philosophical ideal that basically translates to a leader whose ultimate driving purpose is to broadly benefit all of humanity.
Benefiting everyone.
Exactly. The premise is that the current generation represents the apex of this multi-decade project. You, the listener, have been given the 30% formal education and the 70% societal incubation specifically so you can step into the role of a global Hongik Ingen leader.
Man, that is an overwhelming legacy to inherit.
It's immense.
To realize that the society that surrounds us wasn't just randomly assembled, it was meticulously paid for with the unfulfilled potential of the generations before us.
Which brings a crushing weight of responsibility, sure, but also an incredible clarity of purpose.
Absolutely. And that clarity brings us full circle, right back to the original question you brought us today. How do you choose the right person to marry?
It completely changes the criteria.
So what does this all mean for you? When you comprehend the sheer scale of the generational sacrifices that placed you in your current position, finding a life partner is no longer just looking for someone to split the rent with.
Not at all. You are no longer looking for someone who just checks the boxes for financial security or lifestyle compatibility. Marriage is no longer just a tool for survival.
What is it now?
It is intended to be the merging of two highly educated, perfectly prepared global leaders. Two modern Sudebu joining forces to amplify their capacity to benefit society.
So if you ignore that context, if you neglect your own inner mass and choose a partner purely based on their accumulated wealth or their status or just how good they look on paper, you're stepping into a massive trap.
A trap that will leave you miserable.
Because without equal inner volume, you can't stand beside them as a co-leader.
No, you inevitably become a subordinate. The dynamic degrades from a partnership of leaders into a transactional relationship where you are essentially a servant to their wealth or their lifestyle.
Wow. A servant to their wealth.
You just exist to manage their assets or reflect their status rather than enacting your own purpose. And the text warns that this will only leave you with deep, deep resentment.
The sorrow that comes from that realization must be profound.
It is.
Imagine eventually waking up and realizing you squandered the immense potential that was bought and paid for by the sacrifices of your grandparents, simply because you settled for someone whose insides were dark and devoid of jewels.
It's a tragic misallocation of human capital. The stakes for who you choose to integrate your life with and who you choose to become in order to be worthy of that integration are infinitely higher than just avoiding a bad roommate.
It demands that we look far beyond the resume. It demands that we peer directly into a person's inner mass while rigorously interrogating our own.
That's exactly right.
So I want to leave you with a final lingering thought to process on your own.
I'm ready.
The next time you find yourself sitting across from someone on a date or even just taking your seat in a Tuesday morning meeting at that corporate incubator society built for you, ask yourself, are you acting like a modern Sudebu? Utilizing your inner volume to actively listen, understand, and uplift the human being in front of you.
Or are you just staring into a mirror?
Exactly, because the society that sacrificed everything to put you in that very seat is waiting to see exactly what kind of leader you will choose to be.
What a profound way to look at our everyday interactions.
It really is. Thank you so much for bringing us this incredible material and for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking the big questions, keep cultivating your inner mass, and keep your curiosity alive. Until next time.